everyone, I'm Mathilde, co-founder and CEO of Front. I love sharing my journey as a leader, as a founder, but really most of the things I've learned so far have been by talking to people that either are more experienced or wiser than me, and this is what I'm going to do today. Today, I'm thrilled to be here with Pita Taufatofua, an Olympian competitor from Tonga. You may know him as the shirtless flag bearer because he carried Tonga's flag shirtless when he competed in the 2016 Olympics for taekwondo. Then he competed again in 2018 for cross-country skiing. Now in 2021, he's competing once again in taekwondo, but also hoping to add sprint kayaking to his resume, attempting to make history as the first athletes in the modern Olympic era to have competed in 3 entirely different sports. Pita, thanks so much for taking a little out of your, I'm sure, super busy training schedule to chat with me today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
So, as I said, you've competed in 2 Olympics games in 2 different sports, and I'm sure that most people would say, well, that seems impossible. Maybe you thought it was impossible. So my first question to you was, hey, did you ever think it was impossible? And why did you decide to do it and to persevere anyways?
For me, one of the greatest things for me ever since I was a kid was to become an Olympian. It was something that just kind of stuck in my head and wouldn't go away. And when I first accomplished this and I first became an Olympian, there was I guess there were some challenging questions that people put up there. A lot of people said, it's one-hit wonder and luck and all these sorts of things. And I sat there and I took the feedback. Some of the I guess the criticisms at that time, and I sat there and I thought, well, what if I go and I do it again? I qualified. It took me 20 years to qualify the first time, right, to become a taekwondo Olympian. What if I do it again, and what if I try and do it in a sport which I've never done, so there's no perceived advantages? And let me go do it in the Winter Olympics because I've never seen snow before. So let me just keep making it more difficult, right? Just to see, not necessarily to prove to anyone else, but to prove to myself that by becoming an Olympian the first time, something had switched, something had changed in my head where something difficult could now become achievable, and then achievable. So I never thought I'd become a 2-time, let alone 3-time Olympian now. But a lot of the lessons that I learned allowed me to actually see impossible as nothing but I am possible, as they say.
And what do you think these main lessons are that allowed you to do this?
Number one is listen to your heart. And this is something which it's a lot of people speak about this. But what I mean by listen to your heart is that there's a voice inside you that pulls you and draws you towards something greater than yourself. But with this, we've also got voices around us that try to ground us. I'm worried for you. I'm worried that if you don't accomplish that, you're going to feel disappointed. And I love you a lot. I don't want you to feel that disappointment. So these are the voices from people who care. But then we've got voices from other people who, I guess, some people want to put you down in some way. So number one, listen to your heart over anyone else. And, that there's something in all of us which is pulling us towards that. Number two is that there is always a way, always a way. So we have the idea when we're pursuing a goal that we have to go through the front door. Sometimes the front door is shut. So what do? We go and we try the back door. Sometimes the back door is shut. So we look for the window. The window is too high, or the window is shut. We climb the wall and we go through the chimney. And if there is no chimney, we break down the wall. And that's kind of the mantra that I've taken into every challenge, is that there's always a way. It's up to me to find it.
And super inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you feel like when you say people should listen to their inner voice or to their heart, do you feel like the reason why people might not do it is because they're not taking the time, or they might not know how to access it?
I think it's a mixture of both. I certainly think there's an element of I don't know how to access that voice, or to assess what is my heart is it my heart saying something, or is it some other programming that's come in through my head or through the way that I think throughout the throughout the years since I was a kid? Listening to your heart is about understanding the things that make you who you are and that pull you towards that goal or that dream. And it's an individual answer to this question, but I think it's about understanding self first and foremost.
Got it. And last question on this, because I could talk for hours about this, but you're right that sometimes you're taking the time, but you don't know which voice is speaking. And I'm curious if there is anything that you've done to truly know that you wanted to be an Olympian, or like what your heart was saying.
So the first time I wanted to become an Olympian, I think I was 10 years old. I was in primary school, and Tonga got their first medal in the Olympics. It was a silver medal, and we lined the streets, and I stood there on the side holding a sign with a P for the name of Pia Wolfgram. And he looked at me and he waved. I was just a kid amongst 1,000 other kids. And I thought, wow, I'm going to be the first Olympian. Like, that's where the seed was planted. But when we talk about listening from the heart, so I'm a mechanical engineer by study. I did my engineering at University of Queensland, and I masters, etc. One day I was in the university library, and I went, and I would have been, how old? I would have been 18, 19, and I pulled out a VHS. Do you remember the VHS, the cassette?
Yes.
And it was called Olympian Pursuing the Dream. And I put the VHS into the TV, and I sat there in the library and I watched it. And what it showed was that it showed all of these Olympians. It didn't show everyone who was winning, which is a feat in itself, but it showed these people who were overcoming odds. That during the marathon, someone's hip or their knee would, something would break, and they'd find a way to finish and to overcome. And I sat there in the library crying. This is a 18-year-old male who's a martial artist, and I just sat there. So when we say listen to your heart, there's nothing else that moves me the way that humans move me when they overcome challenges. And so I thought that must be a part of what my purpose is meant to be.
I love it. And on this topic, I'm sure that in order to achieve what you've achieved and what you will achieve, you have to train a lot. I'm curious if there are days where you just don't feel like it, or you're not motivated, and I'm curious how you overcome this.
So I've written a book, The Motivation Station, and because I've written a book on motivation, there's an assumption that I'm a motivated person. But first and foremost, I'm a person, right? So the answer to your question is every day, absolutely every day, I don't feel motivated straight away, right? So it's kind of like it's something that I have to overcome each and every day. But the difference is this. The difference is that the time it takes me to overcome that is seconds. I want to stay in bed. I want to eat this food. I want to sleep more. I want to watch that movie and do nothing all day. But that moment doesn't last very long. And I think that's what motivation is. I think motivation is the understanding that it is, we don't want to do things because we want to be lethargic, but we do them anyway. And we do them with a smile because our greatest joy is going to come from finding those things that draw us towards them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's so great to hear. And next time I want to be in bed, I will definitely think about this. I know you've written this book, you talked about it, and I know that in this book you talk about goal setting and motivation. But one thing that you're also talking about in the book is facing depression and anxiety. And so I'm curious if it is something that you have first-hand experience with, and if you can tell us a bit more about this journey.
It's quite interesting, that question. It's a cautious question when I'm asked that question, because there's a danger in me answering that question, which is, if the answer is I haven't dealt with depression, then I can be disconnected from the viewer, right?
Yeah.
because I would then be implying something that I haven't felt as such, right?
Yeah.
But I believe that absolutely everyone at some stage in their life deals with some level of depression and or anxiety. And, I worked in homeless shelters since I was 17. And I was still a kid when I was working in youth homeless shelters myself. And what I will say is that I've seen the depths of depression and anxiety that a human being can reach, but can then overcome. I remember one day sitting in the office at the homeless shelter. We had 4 young people between the ages of 15 to 17. And I sat in the office and I hear this knock on the door and a girl walks in. She would have been around, I think she was around 16. She came in and she was crying. And I said, hey, what's wrong? And she said something that will always stick with me. And I don't want this interview to be about anything negative, but there's a lesson in it. She said, Peter, if I die today, no one will come to my funeral. Imagine hearing this from a 16-year-old girl who had gone through absolute trauma in their life, and you're sitting there thinking, what do I say to this? How do I help this person? What is it that's going on in my life that I need to be, the stuff that's happening in my life is so minuscule compared to the reality of some of the things that I saw. So I sat down and I spoke through this girl and got her to a place where she was feeling better about herself. But we would see this every day in the homeless shelters. It'd be some version of this. And then our task was to help them overcome that depression and help them overcome that anxiety. And most of the time that took time. It wasn't just one conversation. It was 6 months of conversation or a year of conversation. It's like absolutely anything, any challenge in our life is that we have to put in work to overcome. And sometimes I find people just want to be heard. And, there's an element of we need to be empathetic just to sit there and listen. But we also have to empower the person and say that you can absolutely overcome. Let's put in the work together.
I'm curious. I have a good feeling on what you'll say on this question, but I'm curious if you think that there is a moment when you should give up on something. Like, for example, you've tried really hard to achieve a dream, and is there ever a moment where you might have to say, well, maybe I should give up and focus on something else?
The short answer is no. There is never a moment where you should give up. There's plenty of moments where you feel like you want to give up. Yep. But I think the first thing to understand around that is that there's a practical element. If I'm trying to recreate the blockbuster VHS system where I rent out movies, and that's my dream, it probably won't work because we've already moved to DVDs and to streaming and Netflix, etc. So I think there's a practical aspect to that. But what I've also seen is that a lot of people give up long before they're meant to give up, and I call this the Donkey Kong, the Donkey Kong principle. I do private coaching with people to try and help them overcome their stuff. And the Donkey Kong principle is this, and people who have ever played the game, have you played the game Donkey Kong back in the day? It's like a Nintendo game. And basically, the big monkey Donkey Kong stole the princess away, and then you have to go and save her from this. And what happens is that in the last level, Donkey Kong throws all the barrels at you, throws everything. It's like the final king in a game. And then this is when people stop. When everything is going wrong, people go like, maybe the dream isn't for me. Maybe this is too much. What they don't see is that they're on that last level. That doesn't things get harder, progressively harder and harder. And the closer you are to achieving your dream, the more barrels get thrown at you. Keep going.
I think we're reaching the end of the interview. So I have one last question for you. For everyone who's listening to us and who set a goal, but has been afraid to go after it, what's your advice for just taking the first step?
The first step is to be self-reflective. And what I mean by self-reflective is that it's a little hard. We don't want to look at the dragon inside us because it's a little bit scary. So we have to uncover what is it in us that's first of all holding us back from that goal, from that dream. What messaging have we been given as a kid to say that we can't achieve it? Or what messaging are we currently being given to try and prepare us in case we don't get it? Learn tenacity, learn resilience.
Yep.
Resilience is what's going to allow you to actually achieve your goal. We think that achieving a goal is a series of wins. The reality is that achieving a goal is a series of failures, followed by learnings, followed by more failures, followed by more learnings from the failures. And it's, it's something that I really want to get across to people, is that you fail your way to success. You don't necessarily always win, because the universe doesn't allow you to always have things the right way. Anything worthy of achieving, any goal or any dream, is going to require Donkey Kong throwing carts at you and you just keeping on going right through it.
Yeah, great.
Keeping.
Well, thank you so much, Pita. I had such a great time chatting with you this morning. Good luck in Tokyo. We'll be cheering you on, and hopefully we'll be in touch.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone over at Front. As I said, the pleasure is all mine. You're listening to me, but I'm sitting here in awe of the things that you're doing and the business, the company that you're creating. So thank you so much. Pita.